All right, great to be here. Before I start, how many of you have heard about product-led growth in the past? Right, show of hands. And keep your hands up if you say you guys are good at product-led growth. Okay, fewer of you. Well, lots of opportunity from this session. And I'm going to be talking about essentially the imperative, like why is product-led growth important? And it comes down to this idea that we're seeing the rise of the user, so the empowerment of the user in making software buying decisions, and how SaaS companies need to adapt to it. And I'm with OpenView. OpenView is a venture capital firm investing in expansion stage software companies. We've had a major focus in the last couple of years around product-led growth and invested in amazing product-led companies like Datadog, Expensify, Pipefy, Calendly, and Deputy. And I actually lead our efforts post-investment to help our portfolio companies grow even faster. So if you think back to 5, 10, 15 years ago, it used to be really hard to adopt new software. It took lots of people. So the sales process, think about it. A salesperson would try to find their champion, calling into lots of people into an account until they got that hook. Then they would start demos and get buy-in from more and more people, ultimately trying to navigate to that decision maker, the one who signed off on the budget. If that worked well, they then got into procurement, right? Which is a nice back and forth in and of itself. And then after that months and months of sales process, it might take 3-6 months to actually implement the software into the customer, right? It took configuration, it took maybe a complex integration, a custom integration, and then the end user was an afterthought, right? They needed to have training and certification to actually use the software. In some cases, you'd actually have to sit through an hour-long or a day-long training, pass a certification test before you could ever get access to software. And this could happen years after the sales process began. So we started to see a lot of software buying actually fell flat, right? It didn't get adopted in an organization, never lived up to the promise from those initial conversations. And of course, all of this took an extremely long time, right? Months, quarters, years to adopt software. This isn't the case anymore. Today, if you think about a lot of the products that you use in your job, software just kind of shows up, right? Like with Dropbox, Slack, Zoom, it's showing up unannounced in an organization. And it's end users who are finding these products, these really hot products on the minds of everyone in the software world, and they're telling their boss which ones to buy. We're in the end user era, and the best SaaS companies are recognizing it. So if you look at the companies like an Atlassian, like Dropbox, like Zoom, when they release their S1s, which at that point in their life is the most important business document they have, probably actually ever in the company's life, they're talking about adapting to this end user era. Atlassian says, we recognize that users drive the adoption and proliferation of our products. Dropbox says bottom-up adoption within organizations has been critical to our success as users increasingly bring their own tools to work. Zoom says we grow through viral demand driven by individual users. So you might say, this is great for these companies, but is this a broad trend, or are these just a few companies? Even HubSpot, which coined the term inbound marketing and started the inbound movement, has recognized this shift. Brian Halligan, their co-founder and CEO, started noticing how HubSpot bought products was different from the old paradigm. He noticed everything we buy starts with a little project at the edge of the organization. A developer is tinkering with something. A couple of salespeople are trying something out, a couple marketers. All of a sudden, there's a lot of people at HubSpot using that product. It ends up on the CIO's desk. And essentially, the CIO is told, we're using this, we love it, we've got to buy it. So software buying has been turned on its head, and you need to market and sell to humans and enable those humans to put software to work for you. And this wasn't just talk from HubSpot. They actually changed their entire product suite. They introduced freemium versions of every single product they have, and they introduced a free forever CRM tool. So before, the only way you ever got into HubSpot was by talking to a salesperson. In a recent earnings call, they said that more than half of their new customers start using the product before ever talking to someone in sales, if ever at all. So why is this happening? Like, what are the trends that kind of got us to this point? We try to step back and think about what are the forces driving this and why we see it happening right now. The first is on the infrastructure side. So if you think about back in the 90s, the era of the data center, you had data living in a physical box and a physical server and a physical data center, right? And then in the 2000s, we found the cloud era, right? So you started being able to use software on a web application. You didn't need to install it on premises before you could use it. Software was in the cloud. But software still actually took a while to build. Software updates didn't get released all that regularly. This was the era of waterfall development. Today, we're actually in a new era. It's still cloud-based, but we call this the connected cloud. And so software is increasingly composed rather than built from scratch. You're plugging in a mix of services and APIs. So you might throw in Twilio for your SMS, bring in AWS into your application, bring in Auth0. All kinds of tools are plugged in and interconnected. And so you can build software extremely fast and at a lower cost. And so this lower cost of building software means it's easier than ever to start a new company, and companies can actually offer lower prices to their customers. In the 90s, software was a CapEx purchase. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars, and was mostly an upfront purchase. In the cloud-based era, that was the rise of software as a service, right? So you could rent software, pay on an annual basis or maybe a monthly basis, and the cost came down, maybe into the 5 figures. And so it started to democratize the software buying experience. But today, software is increasingly free to get started. There's free trials, freemium products. People don't have a barrier to start using their favorite tools. Think about Slack. You don't start paying for Slack. You don't have to install it on-premise and pay $1 million to start using it. And this influences who actually buys software. So in the 90s era, the on-premise era, you had the CIO as the buyer. And that's because it was really difficult to implement software into your business. And it was mostly a technical compatibility challenge. You had to find software that was compatible with your infrastructure, with your network, with your security policies. And so the CIO was really the gatekeeper in the software buying world. In the cloud-based era, compatibility was no longer as much of an issue. And so you started seeing the rise of executives saying, hey, I'm a sales leader. I need to manage my sales pipeline. I'm going to adopt sales software that helps me improve the performance of my team. Or I'm the finance leader. I'm going to adopt my own accounting software. And you stop seeing CIOs as much of the gatekeeper. But today, the shift has spread even further, where end users are able to start using products for free and bring their own preferred tooling into the job. And so we even see this, I see this in my own experience. I'm sure a lot of you see this as well. When I'm scheduling user interviews, I got really fed up with all the back and forth of scheduling and trying to get on someone's calendar, especially if I'm trying to conduct 20 user interviews in the course of a week or 2 weeks. And so I started using Calendly, where you could send my Calendly link. Someone could schedule time right on my calendar. We both get a calendar invite. The dial-in is already there. It saves so much headache and so much back and forth, and started using it for free. Then I started paying it, put it on my expense report, and then now all of a sudden we use Calendly as a firm. And with this evolution in buyers, you actually have to change how you distribute software, right? So in the CIO era, it was filled with what we call sales-led growth. So we had expensive field sales reps who were carrying a bag. They'd go on site, wine and dine the CIO with steak dinners, with trips on the golf course. And then from a product marketing perspective, it was all about how do we build the right collateral to arm these salespeople who are really expensive. Then as we moved into the cloud-based era, we started seeing a change, right? So software could be sold over the phone. We had inside sales, and we had inbound leads. So it was the marketing team's job to generate a lot of ready-to-buy or somewhat ready-to-buy leads that the sales team could go call on. So this actually automated some of the process of selling. It allowed companies to sell in a faster way and at a lower cost. And it was where we got a lot of the fun terms that we use today in the software industry: SDR, SAL, MQL, SQL. If you look at the end user era and products like Atlassian or Slack or Dropbox, they don't sell with that traditional marketing-led approach. It looks a lot more like a B2C business. And they're looking at user adoption, user activity, how much users are actually sharing the product with other people in their company or outside of their company. So things like viral coefficient. It's a different set of metrics, and it's a different way that you think about distributing software. And it's leading with the product experience rather than sales or marketing folks. And so we call this product-led growth. So this evolution, I mean, it's a confluence of factors, right? It's changes in infrastructure, in price point, in distribution, and buying behavior. This evolution can't be stopped. It's not happening overnight, but it's a gradual shift, just like you can think of the shift from on-premise to software. Some people still use on-premise software, but it's really gotten dated at this point. And so product-led growth is actually how you adapt and how you win in the end-user era. At OpenView, we call product-led growth a business strategy where product usage is the primary driver of user acquisition, conversion, and expansion. And this is the fundamental strategy that underpins the success of the businesses on everyone's mind. So like Slack, Dropbox, Atlassian, and Zoom. In our portfolio, companies like Datadog, Expensify, Calendly, and Deputy. So in my role at OpenView, I work with our portfolio companies either that have already adopted product-led growth, help them to grow faster, or that want to adopt product-led growth. And there really are 4 steps to getting this right. The first is about appealing to end users. If you think about from your product marketers, you're great at understanding personas. There are 2 general types of personas of folks, right? You've got the executive, so they're the person that actually buys the software. And what they care about is ROI. What's the business benefit of adopting the software? And for a sales leader, that might be, we need to manage our sales pipeline. End users honestly don't care that much about ROI. Their pain point is more about annoyance, right? So it's frustration. It's, I hate scheduling meetings, and that frustration is so acute that they go start searching for Google and finding a product themselves. Or they search in the App Store, or they ask their friends, why does scheduling meetings suck so much? And so this can sound like, as a millennial, I can say this can sound like millennial whining, but annoyance is actually real opportunity for software companies. And the best software companies have realized this, and this is how they lead to find new customers. So for Slack, it's, I hate internal emails. They're so annoying. Expensify, I hate expense reports. They're so annoying. There must be a better solution. Dropbox, I hate file sharing. Or Zoom, I hate web conferencing. Why do I need to download WebEx? Why doesn't it just work, right? That hit a little too close to home. And so once you appeal to the end user, you need to make it really easy for them to get started. End users demand self-service. Humans are great, but you don't want humans blocking the funnel. So end users hate the traditional way of buying software, the request a demo, and then talk to an SDR, then talk to sales, then fill out a contract. And actually, even if you use DocuSign, while that does some automation, imagine if you had to use DocuSign to start buying Uber. You just download Lyft and start using Lyft. And so end users love automation. They love easily signing up with just their email address or with a single sign-on credential, click through terms and conditions, automated onboarding that's in the product experience, documentation and a knowledge base to get answers to their questions and help solve problems, bots to give them an immediate response if they need help. And then after you get users starting to use your product, you actually have to show value before asking for money from them, right? So they should find their aha moment or get activated in the product before they have to pull out a credit card. And one example of this is with Slack. So this is a screenshot of Slack's homepage. You can see you just sign up with an email address. You get into the product. You can use Slack as much as you want. You can invite unlimited people into your Slack instance. And in fact, Slack's pretty boring if you don't invite people. So you're encouraged to. And as soon as Slack kind of goes from that place where you're sending some messages to your friends to the place where actual work happens and you have really important communication in Slack, that's when you need to start paying for it because your message history starts to go away. And so it's at that point after you've activated and found success, that's when the transaction occurs. And so a free offering is becoming table stakes with product-led growth. Every year we release a SaaS benchmark survey. The latest one was actually launched this week. You can find it at saasbenchmarks.com. We had 500 companies participate. We learned that about a third of software companies say that product-led growth is foundational or fundamental to how they go to market. And for these companies, almost all of them have some sort of free offering. It generally is a free trial. So 3 out of 4 companies have a free trial that are product-led growth. And then 2 in 5 of them have a freemium version. Some of them have both. Like if you think about Calendly for scheduling, they have a freemium offer, but they actually start with the free trial. So you've got 14 days to use the fully featured product, and then certain things start to go away. But you can still continue to use the product as long as you want. For free. And a free offering is not just for these kind of consumer-like products that are super easy to use. Friction shouldn't be an excuse to get your product. In our survey, we found that half of companies with the free offering say that there is actually some friction to using the product. But what this then puts the onus on you to find ways to reduce that friction through great onboarding experiences, right? Finding what is that moment of activation, or what's the first thing a customer needs to do, guiding them in the app to do that thing as quickly as they can, or getting creative with ways to add value. So having an activation checklist, or having some dummy data for the customer to do a product tour, play around with what's the end result, and why should they give you that data. And if you're still saying, look, my product is really enterprise software, there's really nothing we can do, you can actually get creative with being free. So HubSpot, before they launched their freemium editions, they had their website grader. So you can type in a website domain, and they would grade your website based on performance, mobile compatibility, SEO, security, everything. And that's a great lead gen tool to say, oh, you want to improve your website performance? HubSpot can help you do that. And HubSpot's now graded over 4 million websites with their website grader. So next time you're thinking about maybe spending $50,000 on another ROI study, you might want to think about, are there product opportunities that you can use as a marketing channel, even if you're not able to go fully free trial or freemium with your product. And then after you have users who are successful with your product, you want to first start with hiring support. So helping those users be successful. With support, you'll also learn what are the challenges that users are running into, and then you can build that into the product or build documentation around it. As users start inviting more users and you start having teams involved, that support becomes more proactive. It's more like customer success. And later on, as teams go into departments and large companies, they run into more challenges with adopting your software. So they have more questions, more people need to get involved. There's challenges with compatibility of software. And so you hire sales last at a product-led organization. So PLG is not anti-sales. It's just about bringing in sales at the right time. And sales looks a lot more like customer expansion, really, than it does a traditional sales motion. So if you look at Zoom, in their S1, they said that 55% of their customers who spend over $100,000 started with one free user. So that user did not start by talking to a salesperson. They just started using Zoom. But now that they're spending $100,000 plus, they probably needed help along the way, right? Maybe they needed help with Zoom Rooms or with an on-premise instance of Zoom. There were more questions that came up. And so the salesperson wasn't that kind of typical field sales rep that was going and whining and dining the CIO. The salesperson was really hyper aware of the product. They were talking to someone who was educated and knew how to use the product and wanted to be successful. And so they were able to work in collaboration with the customer to help the customer be successful and ultimately buy more. So sales is really about expanding the natural rate of growth that you have in an account. And sales should be a lot more data-driven. And so you can use data from users in the product to improve the sales process, both in terms of who you actually engage with and when you engage, and then what you say to them. But we're finding very few companies are doing this effectively today. Only 23% of folks in our survey said that they track PQLs, or product qualified leads, and their funnel conversion. So you want to understand with a product qualified lead, what are the triggers in the product, whether that's someone used the product more than X, or they want access to certain features, or they signed up for a call to action in the product. What are those things that indicate someone's ready to expand their relationship with you and buy more? And then you want to send those leads to the sales team, have someone in sales follow up with them immediately, and then you want to track the conversion of those cohorts over time. And in fact, with product-led growth, data isn't just on the sales side. You need to become a more data-driven organization entirely and start measuring everything. So the first step is product analytics. And so you want to, and there's a lot of third-party tools out there that you can find, but you want to set up great analytics to understand what's going on with your users and how they're using the product. And ideally, this should be set up in such a way where people can have self-service access. So you don't need to run a SQL query or ask a data scientist to get a product usage stat for you. Once product analytics are set up, you want to define that point when users have activated in the product or been successful and how that impacts conversion. And then you want to run in-product experiments to guide more users to that point of activation. And then keep tabs on user cohorts to see that you're actually making improvements over time. And I think product marketing has a really big role in this process. I recommend having growth teams that should consist of someone on the engineering side, but also someone in product marketing, and maybe even someone from customer success or customer support. And companies with growth teams are more than twice as likely to be constantly running experiments to drive growth in the product. So do you want to be like these companies like Slack, like Dropbox, like Zoom? They're all in on product-led growth, as you can see from their S1 filings. I didn't even mention Twilio, but they say, we put a commercial transaction after the customer is experiencing success with our products. We call this inverting the traditional enterprise sales model. And the PLG IPO wave is really building. So in 2012, we only had one public product-led growth company. Now we're up to 20 and counting. More than half of the companies that I've IPO'd in the last 2 years have been product-led growth companies. And so it's really exciting to see this momentum. And these companies aren't just going public, but they're actually outperforming their peers. So at OpenView, we track a product-led growth index, and PLG companies are outperforming the rest of the SaaS comp set, as well as clearly the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. And these companies are going to be sticking around. They're now worth more than $200 billion in market cap and counting. So the end user era is here. And hope that you guys will adapt to it. Thank you very much. And I think I have time for one or two questions. And is there a mic runner, by the way? Do you want to? Yes. Find the mic runner.
Thank you so much. It was a really exciting discourse on product-led growth. One question I have is for organizations that have a traditional enterprise sales model. This change represents enormous organizational change, just different business strategy, different KPIs, different product, different marketing initiatives. For an organization that has traditional enterprise sales motion, how do you recommend them kind of testing the waters without having to commit wholesale with so much risk attached to that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. To me, it's looking at, as the kind of lowest risk opportunity is looking at new products that you want to sell into that install base. Because ideally, the customers have started using the product, they've been successful with it, they've had all of the implementation, but you want to sell more stuff to them. How do you make it easy for them to launch a trial from inside the product instance? Or maybe it's a freemium version of that new product where they can use up to a certain amount in usage, and then you can actually then sell them on to a full company-wide subscription to it later on. So it's really great for net new products. And I actually have to say that's one of the ways HubSpot adopted product-led growth is that they acquired a product that was product-led. They learned the successes of optimizing a freemium type business, and then they took those lessons and applied them to all of their other product lines later on. All right, and then I think we could maybe do one more.
How do you think about companies that traditionally need to sell into large enterprises? And typically, it's harder to break into those departments or those organizations that have a lot of products, and the only outreach mechanism sometimes is events.
So it's, again, finding ways to get value to that end user that's probably been neglected in the enterprise. And so if your product has some benefit for an end user, what can you do to make it easy for that end user to try out that functionality? Doesn't necessarily even mean giving away the rest of the product, but those end users, if you solve their pain, they will help create a groundswell internally. And like one example in our portfolio is Expensify. So you can download the Expensify app on the App Store and start filling out your expense report, start taking photos of your receipts, and then you send that to a finance person to reimburse you. What we see tends to happen with even large businesses is that all of a sudden, a lot of people in sales, and maybe some people in marketing, and maybe some people in other functions are sending expense reports to the same finance person to approve it. And then that can be a trigger for Expensify to reach out and say, well, don't you want to build in all of the automation, all the rules, being able to pay people, being able to actually make sure that you have the right protocols in place so people can only expense certain things. And so that's a solution that's much more enterprise grade, but they started by going bottoms up and winning with the individual user, which gives them permission to go up in the organization. So, and that's all the time I have, but you can follow me on Twitter or send me a message. I'm just Kyle@ov.vc if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.